Yes, indeed. This is Professor David Steinberg of the SteinbergFiles.com. Check out our Facebook page, Steinberg Files. NBC News is finally reporting what we already knew. When President Obama, remember when President Obama said, if you like your health insurance plan, you can keep it? He was lying. He knew it wasn't true. He said it anyway. From NBC News. 4 sources deeply involved in the Affordable Care Act tell NBC News that 50 to 75% of the 14 million consumers who buy their insurance individually can expect to receive a cancellation letter over the next year because their existing policy doesn't meet the standards mandated by the health care law. That is a minimum of 7 million people. One expert predicts that the number could reach as high as 80%. 10 million people will lose their health care. And all say that many of those forced to buy pricier new plans will experience quote-unquote sticker shock. So when the president said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, he was lying. How do we know he was lying? Because the Department of according to NBC, the Department of Health and Human Services wrote regulations saying that if any part of a policy was significantly changed, the deductible, the copay, or the benefits, the policy would not be grandfathered. In other words, if you have an insurance policy now and you can keep that policy exactly as it is, no premium change, no change in care, not even moving a comma, well, yes, then you can keep your health care coverage. But if your insurance carrier changes one thing, which they have to do, because Obamacare has made insurance so much more expensive for them, you will lose your policy. Yet President Obama, this was in 2010, this is the Obama administration that wrote this regulation in 2010, making sure that you wouldn't be able to keep your policy. Yet President Obama, who had promised in 2009, if you like your health plan, you will be able to keep your health plan, was still saying in 2012, 2 years later, if you already have health insurance, you will keep your health insurance. He was lying. He was lying. What is he going to say? He didn't know? Oh yes, this is the guy who didn't know that his administration was selling guns to Mexican drug cartels under Fast and Furious. This is the guy who didn't know that Benghazi was the product of a armed Al-Qaeda-aided terrorist group, not a spontaneous response to a video on YouTube. This is the guy who didn't know that his IRS was persecuting conservative groups, Tea Party groups, Jewish groups, all kinds of groups. Oh yes, no, he didn't know about this either with his quote-unquote signature program. This is happening to private policies now. But wait till next year when Obamacare regulations, when Obamacare is applied, Obamacare regulates and applies to businesses. If you work for a company and you have health insurance now, you will not. Your company won't be able to afford to pay the new premiums mandated by Obamacare, and you will lose your policy. What does that mean for people? What will it mean for you? if this hasn't happened already. George Schwab, 62. Note the age. This is exactly the kind of person that Obama's administration wants to persecute. Older person was perfectly happy with his plan for Blue Cross, which also insured his wife for a 228-month premium. But now that we have the historic Obamacare law, his policy is no longer available, but he can purchase a comparable plan for $1,208 a month. From $228 to $1,208, plus a $5,500 deductible. He then went to the Obama Exchange. He actually got it to work, which is amazing. His best option is a 415% jump to $948 a month. Do you have $1,000 a month for health care? Because if you don't, you won't have it. That's what's going to happen to George Schwab. The deductible is less, he said, but the plan doesn't meet my needs. It's unaffordable. In other words, he has lost his health insurance because of Obamacare. Precisely what the president promised wouldn't happen, even though he knew it would happen. One last question. These regulations that mandated that people lose their health coverage went into effect in 2010. Why are we seeing this story now? Why didn't NBC? Why didn't we see it before the 2012 election when it would have mattered? You know why? Because you guys work for President Obama. You aren't a news agency, you're a propaganda agency. Why are we seeing it now? I'll tell you why. I mean, these guys are lazy. I don't deny that. They're not that lazy. Here's why. They had to make sure Obama won the election, and then we had this little, this debt ceiling crisis where a couple of the few politicians who aren't on the dole, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, and conservatives in the House, actually threatened to defund the program. Had to get past that. Had to give Mitch McConnell his $2 billion Kentucky kickback in return for a complete Republican surrender. Then we'll run the story. How much do you want to bet NBC had this story and sat on it? And that these quote-unquote White House sources are coming out now because they decided now's a good time. Now's a good time. Well, all of you who voted Democrat, I hope you're going to be happy paying $1,000 a month for not very good health care with very poor doctors and very few doctor choices, because that's what's available to you. That is what our historic president has done for you, and he isn't even honest enough to tell the truth. This is Professor David Steinberg.